we did not have anyone sign up for public comment, so we will move past that on the agenda. We need to make a motion. Can I get a motion for approval of the minutes from the last meeting, please?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and properly seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any nays or abstentions? All right, that is approved. New business, presentation of the Metropolitan Nashville Government Fiscal Year 2023 Schedule of Expenditures of Federal and State Awards and reports required by the Single Audit Act as amended of the Uniform Guidance. Can I get a motion?
So moved. Second.
It's presented.
You guys are presenting, yay! You ready?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Just approved.
So I'm David Hunt. I'm a partner with Crossland, and this is Katie Ferris. She is a director with Crossland. So Katie's going to be doing all the heavy lifting. I'm just here for more support.
All right, so we'll start with the blue cover document. It's the schedule of expenditures of federal and state awards. So the only part of this document that is ours are the two auditors' reports that are in here. The first one is on pages 1 and 2. That's our auditor's report on internal control over financial reporting and on compliance and other matters based on the audit financial statements performed in accordance with government auditing standards. You'll see in that we reported that we did not identify any material weaknesses. However, we did identify what we considered to be a significant deficiency, which we'll discuss a little bit further down the line when I get to the back of this report. And we did not have any instances of noncompliance or other matters that were required to be reported in this report. The next report is our independent auditor's report on compliance for each major program and on internal control over compliance required by the Uniform Guidance, and our report on the schedule of the expenditures of the federal and state awards. That opinion was unmodified. We did not have any findings on any of the major programs, and we reported that for the schedule of federal awards and federal and state awards, that it's fairly stated in relation to the financial statements as a whole. And then following those reports is schedule of expenditures. You jump ahead to page, I believe it's 19, you'll see that total federal awards for fiscal year ended June 30, 2023 was about $407 million. And we audited 5 of those as major programs. And then for state awards, it was a total of almost $34 million.
Just everybody's observing this, just to put these numbers in perspective, right? We're a $3.2 billion budget, and you're looking at a little under $500 million of it right here. I mean, this is significant to us as a government. It's important to a lot of local governments, but it's really important to us.
All right, on page 27 is the schedule of findings and questions cost. This first section is just a summary of the results. You'll see that it says, we did not identify any material weaknesses. We did identify a significant deficiency. There was no non-compliance material to the financial statements. And then for the report of the rewards, again, like I said, no material weaknesses, no significant deficiencies, and no other findings that were required to be disclosed. On page 28, you'll see the list of the major programs that we audited. For fiscal year 23, that was the Head Start Cluster, the Education Stabilization Fund, the MAC Federal COVID Rent Utility Assistance, the Coronavirus State and Local Fiscal Recovery Funds, and the WIC Special Supplemental Nutrition Program for Women, Infants, and Children.
Katie, do you know the aggregate amount of those 5 programs? I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
I want to say it was somewhere around $300 million. It was like
So
80%.
$300 million of your 435.
Of the 407.
It was
right?
around, I think it was around 80% of the total federal expenditures, which since Metro was a low-risk auditee for fiscal year 23, we're only required to audit 20%. But given the size of these programs that we were audited as major, we achieved
There's a
approximately
formula
80%
you go
coverage.
through to determine how much. And if you're low risk, you have to meet at least 20%. If you're high risk, at least 40%. But sometimes the formula will kick out a bigger percentage based on what you have not tested in the last 2 years. Because if you
Yeah.
have a major program and you haven't tested it within 2 years, you have to test it regardless of what the percentages say.
And then a couple of these were tested again this fiscal year because the compliance supplement required them to be audited as major programs. So. Section 2, you'll see where we have our financial statement finding. This is item 2023-001. It's the significant deficiency that was discussed earlier. It's regarding Metropolitan Nashville Public Schools, grant receivables and expenditures. Essentially, MNPS teams discovered that grant receivables were overstated approximately $13 million due to expenditures that had accumulated from 2019 to 2023. Ultimately, these were valid expenditures that were recorded to grant business units and grant funds that at the time that they occurred should have been reported in the MNPS General Operating Budget Fund. These were things where, let's say, an employee was coded to be recorded to this grant fund because the grant was covering their payroll, the period of the grant ended, and there was a mistake in getting that payroll coded back to the general purpose fund. Examples like that.
And again, just for context, that 13 million over that number of years is 1% of total grant money or 20%, or do you have a feel for that?
Off the top of my head, no. I do know a lot of this money is MNPS related money. Pretty much all of the Department of Education funds that you'll see, which there's a subtotal for that. It's actually should probably be the last subtotal before the total federal, so probably page 19. Let's see.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
probably
the
would be
total
around
U.S. Department of
1%.
Ed for fiscal year 23 was about $260 million.
Gotcha.
And pretty much all of that flows through MNPS. There are a few others in other department, like U.S. Department.
And that was a one-year sum, 260 million.
Yes,
Okay.
for fiscal year 23, yes. So,
I think the challenge, though, and correct me if I'm wrong, so $13 million accumulated, I get it, over the course of several years, was being charged to a grant that had closed, that it should have been going to the operating fund, and so they overspent in the operating fund, correct?
that was not my understanding. My understanding was that that money would have been spent one way or the other. It's just that it
So they don't
appeared
have a
that
shortfall in their operating budget?
No, the operating budget for those years would have been sufficient to cover these expenditures had they been moved to the general fund
Okay.
at that
Just
time.
basically coded to the wrong place.
Okay. Okay. Because typically we have to come up with money to fix, to
Yeah.
plug those holes.
Yes, for
I think it was
those,
budgeted, it just wasn't, the actual,
Okay.
actual expenditures were not coded to the right place.
yeah, we did go back and look at the operating budgets for those years, and they did have excess in those years that would have covered these additional expenditures had they been moved over properly.
Okay.
So this is an item we talked about in the fall, and my view is different than that. I understand what is here, and this is a spot where at the time I was anticipating it would show up, but the truth is, it was mismanaged. And they overspent the grants. That shouldn't have happened. They've taken some corrective actions since then to bring that back, and hopefully we won't see that happen again. But this is $13 million that could have been in the fund balance. It could have been used for other things, and where I part ways with everyone is the money would have been spent otherwise. Maybe that's true, but there would have been a lot of choices. Here the choice was kind of made for us because of the overspend.
So after where we've given our finding, you'll see management's response and the corrective actions that they plan to take for that, which again, most of those have been put in place already, and they've started that process to more closely monitor those grant funds and those business units, make sure that what's flowing through that is appropriate and not past the time period for the grant. So, any questions on the schedule of expenditures?
Do you follow up on corrective action to make sure that they are, so when does that happen?
That'll happen during our fiscal year
Right.
24 audit,
You'll-
which will
you'll
be
notice
starting
that-
in a few months.
The next
Sorry.
page.
Gotcha.
You'll notice in section 5, on page 30, where we followed up on the prior year's findings, and whether
Gotcha.
they were corrected, whether they have not been resolved and are continuing. If they were continuing, we would have another, full written finding as well. But you can see the ones we had in the prior year were corrected.
Does anybody else have any questions?
We do have one more item, to cover one.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, we also have a letter of recommendations, a management letter, if you will. And so if you take a look at that after the first page that describes, what a material weakness is, what a significant deficiency is, We go on to say on page 2 that we did have a significant deficiency. I'm not going to go over it again because this is the same one that Katie covered, but we also included it in our management letter. And then beginning on page 3, after that, we did have none of these rose to the level of a material weakness or a significant deficiency, but they were observations we had that for recommendations that we had for the Metro government from a financial standpoint. First one was timely preparation of bank reconciliations. This is not the first time we've had this over the years. We've had it several times. They are getting better in the preparation of the bank recs, but there is still some that are not done timely or what we believe to be timely.
What do you believe to be timely?
Probably within 60 days. And so you can see these that we've listed here range anywhere from 77 to 310 days. Now, some of them are being done timely. This is not all the bank recs, but these are the ones that in our testing we found exceeded what we believe to be, a good period of time.
Not to interrupt, but did they have any reasoning for why some were done timely and some were not? Is it a human resources?
Yeah, I think it's, I would guess management would have to speak to that, but I would think it would be probably a staffing issue.
We did go to a automated bank recon in August of '22. Before, none of them were making the 60 days, but with that automated bank recon, some of it's how we do it is departments aren't collecting the cash into R12, but they're putting it in the bank. So we have all these misreconciled items. So we have to do the research, reach out to the departments, get them to enter it in R12, or they put it in R12, but they don't put it in the bank. There's a lot of different moving parts where we have to, and we have 13 different bank accounts that we have to reconcile.
Sounds like some processes and procedures could be tightened up.
Yeah, we have a 100-page process and procedure manual that we follow, so.
Yeah, let me help with that.
Yeah.
There are a lot of them, and we don't control them all. And so there's distributed cash and so forth. So these things don't just sit and wait to get attention. They get some attention. We ask some questions. It may take a while to get some things back, but they're a pretty low dollar, pretty low risk sort of thing with it.
Yeah.
The automation will help, but I really don't envision a day where it's perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, and to speak to Kevin's point, the timeliness that we're talking here is we base that on the completion date, not necessarily, that doesn't necessarily reflect when they started working on the bank reconciliation. That's just when it was fully complete. So.
The second item on page 4, in our pension census testing, we did note 2 employees out of our sample of 60. So, you wouldn't think significant, but there are a lot of pensioners, so any findings or any items that we find in our testing there, obviously, is something that, we need to be concerned about and from the standpoint that we need to get that right. But there were 2 of the 60 that we tested where the pay rate, included in the census data, was higher than their actual salary. And those errors were caused by issues on how salary changes were processed across various systems by the human resources and payroll departments. We made a recommendation, obviously, that needs to be corrected. And then management's response you can see there, but the interface between, I guess, some of the payroll or pension data and R12 was not working correctly. There's supposed to be a control there, a fail-safe that's built into the system or the interface of the system that did not work in a couple of instances, but since then they have corrected that situation, those system errors, and hopefully this will not happen again. And then finally, Metropolitan Nashville Davidson County General Sessions Court Comptroller's Investigation Report. So the office of the Tennessee office Comptroller of the Treasury received an investigative report in July of '23 related to the General Sessions Court. The Comptroller's office initiated an investigation after receiving an allegation of potential conflict of interest regarding a grant. The investigation was limited to selected records for a period from October 18 to June 21. The results of the investigation were that the judge had an undisclosed potential conflict of interest related to a community court grant program, and the judge failed to adequately disclose that business activity. Obviously, judges should adhere to the reporting requirements to ensure complete and accurate information is provided. And their response, you can see on page 5, they continue to improve their grant oversight and management. Internal grant managers and judges overseeing specialty court, which is a grant recipient, will continue to adhere to all grant award conditions and reporting requirements, and will continue to ensure that complete and accurate information is provided to avoid any conflict of interest in the future.
You know the size of that grant?
I do not offhand.
I do not. I will say this particular comment is included in the management letter because it's required by the state of Tennessee for us to address it. in
It's
our
below our
management letter.
scope.
Yeah, and the period they investigated was prior to this audit period. So since it doesn't specifically relate to the period that it was under audit, they says, it's sufficient for us to just address it in our management letter. So that's why it's included.
Yeah, for the state of Tennessee, there is no scope limit from the standpoint of if anything is turned into the state as a potential product, I'm making you $25. You would not believe some of the things that are turned in. I mean, that's all principle taking cookies from a bake sale or something like that. So everything is turned in, and then we are required to at least inquire about that, and how that was resolved, or if it was resolved, or if it continues, and we're required to put it in our management letter. So I'm not discounting what this is, and I do not know the dollar value. I'm just saying we're required to report it. I think it's over $100 or something.
Okay. Anybody else have anything? Okay, well, the approval has been moved and seconded,
It's a motion to accept.
Oh.
It's very particular in those
Okay.
bylaws.
Motion to accept, we'll just start over. Can I get a motion to accept?
So moved.
Second.
Perfect. All in favor? Any abstaining or no votes? All right. On to the presentation of the Metropolitan Nashville Government Fiscal Year 2023. Nope, we've already done that. Sorry. Discussion on the audit recommendations follow-up. Audit of the Criminal Justice Center construction project issued February 26, 2024.
Yes.
Ms. Lauren.
Yes, so in November of 2020, our office completed an audit of the Criminal Justice Center, a very large construction project right across the street. That audit looked at pretty much everything encompassed in that construction project. From start to finish, and it came out with 5 recommendations. Those recommendations were made, 4 of them to General Services and 1 of them to the Finance Department. They encompass things like establishing a guaranteed maximum price earlier, breaking out some of the costs so that they're not lump sum, making sure that background check requirements are consistent across both the contract and policy. And then also looking into adding conflict of interest disclosure for some of the contracts. The one related to the contract was made to the Finance Department, and the others were made to General Services. All 5 of them were accepted. Our auditor, Nan Nguyen, went out and did a follow-up audit of these, and all were found to be implemented. General Services has done a lot to add language and make things more consistent, and adjust some of the purchase orders and background information to address all of the recommendations, as well as Finance. The Procurement Standards Board did discuss having the disclosures within the contracts. I believe ultimately they decided not to, but our recommendation was to consider, since we can't tell a department to do something. So they considered it, they did discuss it and look into the reasonings that we had for disclosing those related parties. They just ultimately decided not to do it.
Any questions?
Can you just flesh out that larger point a little bit more, like some additional detail on that? So the recommendation was?
The recommendation was that certain contractors disclose related parties if they're going to subcontract, and do it within the contracting process so that you know which ones that you're dealing with are related parties, because oftentimes there are related parties with large construction companies. And that was a best practice that was discovered by our auditor at the time, and so the recommendation was made. The discussion at the Procurement Standards Board, I believe, was, I'm not completely sure because we didn't have the video, but they did discuss it. They did look at the underlying requirements and ultimately just decided not to.
So there's no video or audio of
There
that
might be.
Procurement Standards
Honestly,
Board?
since Nan's not here, I can't necessarily say, but I do believe that we reviewed the minutes and reviewed the agenda, at least at that point, if not more.
Okay. I think, Chair, I would just be interested to kind of understand the nature of that discussion, and invariably, I mean, from the council side of the house, I'm always interested to understand if there's anything that we need to update. Of course, wouldn't want to do that, not understanding the conversation that they had there, but I think there's been a fair amount of interest and engagement in the council over the recent term and years about procurement standards. So that's just something that's kind of top of mind for me, just from an awareness perspective.
We can go back and I'll have a short write-up that I can send out to all of you after the meeting to give some more background on it.
That'd be great. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
If anybody who's finished it just needs to be
If you don't have anything else on the agenda, you can go.
Trying to be helpful here. I know people have lives besides Metro. I don't, but
Get your parking passes.
Yeah, parking passes are right there next to Councilmember Allen, so grab one on your way out.
thank you, everybody. Cross did a great job as always. Well, I appreciate it.
Thank y'all so much.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
I left you your that's what, Kristen.
Thank you very much. Good to see you guys.
And y'all can leave.
Don't say I can't clear a room.
If we're done with that report, they're welcome to leave as well.
Yeah, I think we're done. There's no action required here. So we will move on to the next section, which is internal audit project status.
Wait, there was one after the tentative.
Oh, I'm sorry, the Metropolitan Auditor's Annual Performance Review Process
So,
overview.
the two tentative audits did not get issued, which is why we're skipping over those. But the last item being, so annually you all are required to do my performance evaluation. We do this in June of every year. You're also required to salary set or make any adjustments. The only thing that's included in my salary annually is the COLA, if there is a COLA. So we have a 360 process that we have followed for about 5 or 6 years. And so we take this opportunity at this meeting to kind of give an overview of it. So what happens is you all will receive a review like the one that's in the workbook from last year that Teresa will send out to everybody. You all will fill it out and send it back to her, and she will compile those results. Internally to our office, Bill will send out an anonymous survey to our staff and receive that feedback, and he will compile that, as well as I will do a self-assessment that will also get sent out before the meeting for everybody to review as well. So we take those 3 things, and then at the June meeting, y'all will discuss the results of that in the public meeting and determine merit increase if there is any, or any changes to salary. And so that's kind of just a high-level overview, since not everybody has participated in it before. If there's any changes or questions, yeah.
So, so there's a section in here about the workplace environment and that type of thing that I know nothing about, so I
Yes.
just skip that section?
So
or-
what we can do, which I guess I didn't adjust last year's, because there was some discussion about that last year. I think what we're gonna try and do is we'll try and do it still at the end of the year, because this meeting won't happen until the end of June. Bill will send out our staff survey so that y'all can see the results of that. And I will do the self-assessment so y'all can see the results of that as well, to give you all time to review. Because my self-assessment will have notes in there on why I felt like I scored certain ways. And so you can take into consideration my results as well as the office's results.
Gotcha.
Awesome.
So when you say the office's results, you mean the office's, the results of their comments about you?
Yes.
Are you also performing the same assessment for all of your staff? And is
Yes.
that part of
It is not
this
part of
information?
this. Our staff, we do annual reviews at the end of the year. It's a lengthy little process that we go through, because we have to set a methodology on how we give out our merit increases, if there are any. And we have to set that and send it to HR beforehand, and then we do those performance evaluations. Historically, the past 3 years maybe, it started when you were here the last time, the committee has typically taken the average of our staff merit increases, and that is what they have given to me. So that will be, we won't give individual results, but we will give you all the average of what their merit increases were, so that you can see those.
Okay.
Awesome. Anybody else?
I just have a general question as far as committees, boards, commissions that have a similar kind of relationship of the board relative to the director. Do they all follow a similar process, or is this something?
Not to my knowledge. I mean, this is the only one that I'm aware of where we do this. It really started with the prior executive director, Metropolitan Auditor, because he felt like it was very awkward for himself or his staff to be kind of involved in seeking the committee members' evaluations of him. And so he asked me to do it, and I said, okay, sure, I could do that. And so that's how that process got started. And it is, as far as I know, unique to audit, but you know, I only represent a handful of boards and commissions, so I'm not aware of another one of mine where that conflict occurs.
Well, I mean, I commend the process. Like, I think it's good, and I think, you know, we've had a lot of conversation about boards and commissions in Metro, and as I've spoken with some of them and their directors as it relates to appointments and so forth, and just kind of trying to understand what the board's or committee or commission's relationship is relative to their director, right? Like, that's different in a whole variety of boards and commissions. It's interesting to me that often members of a committee or a commission, and even sometimes the director, don't necessarily understand what that relationship is, or it's not particularly formalized, right, from a procedural and evaluative standpoint. So
You guys hearing this?
Yeah.
What is that?
It's people walking through the door.
Yeah.
Is that what that is?
Oh, is that ringing bell?
Yeah.
I don't even hear that anymore, Mr. Crumbo. Like that. If you've sat in this room for 8 years, you don't even hear that. I'm like, what is Mr. Crumbo speaking about?
People walking through the door is no problem, but if it was like related to a fire. Oh, no.
Different noise.
But just, you know, when we do have a good process like this in place, I'm always interested in seeing, is this applicable, or could this be standardized across our boards and commissions? Obviously, these questions are particular to the work that you do, but I do just think for the committee's general awareness, I think that's an interesting question, because I think sometimes that becomes a little challenging for Metro. You know, like mayor's relationship to director relative to board and who evaluates whom, and it's sometimes a little messy in Metro, it feels like.
And sometimes having a script to follow can be freeing for everyone.
Correct, right?
If I may, like, I haven't actually, like, I mean, I think I've mentioned to them that I do this, but I haven't, like, sort of, like, officially got the Department of Law's blessing for this process. I was just like, sure, I can do that, that's fine, I'm happy to help. But I don't know if, like, as a department, like, we would want to do that in all of those cases. I know some of the other senior attorneys would not like to do that. So I'm just, you know,
Again,
trying to be helpful.
I'm just saying it's interesting to contemplate, because we have a lot of different organizational relationships, kind of hire or fire or not, or evaluation or not, or this commission relative to this direct. It's a space that I think could benefit from some just clarity and procedure all across the board.
Are you happy with it?
I appreciate feedback. I would like feedback from
All right, when the customer says yes, stop selling.
Right, exactly. No, again, commending this process, appreciating it, and then just being mindful of how it might be applicable, if appropriate, in other scenarios. So.
Okay,
Thank
seeing
you.
no further discussion, internal audit project status, recommendation, implementation, follow-up status.
Okay, so not much has changed since our last audit committee meeting. Only 3 recommendations were due before this one. And those 3 were all reported as implemented. 2 of them were from the juvenile court audit, and 1 of them was from the police early intervention system. The juvenile court ones, we are holding, kind of like we discussed at the last meeting, how we're gonna kind of do increment follow-up. We're giving them time to operate, and then we'll start following up on those regularly instead of waiting until they're all done, like we would for something like early intervention. So those were all reported.
All right, ongoing projects?
We currently have 5 reports in draft phase. If you look at the audit plan, we are making way through. We've pretty much wrapped up most all of our audits that we had started in the previous year. We've kicked off 2 in the current plan year. We hope to kick off 3 more very soon. And then on the next page where we've got them kind of listed out, we've issued one audit report this year, as well as we've got, like I said, 5 in draft. We've had 5 reports to our hotline or Hub Nashville, or various ways to report allegations to our office. 2 of those are still open that we're either investigating or deciding whether or not we should investigate. And we've issued that 1 investigative report this year.
When you decide, when something comes through the hub and you decide not to investigate it, how do you explain that to the constituent or whoever has? Because typically those come in anonymously.
If they're anonymous, then we don't have a method to reach back out to them.
Right.
And so, unfortunately, a lot of times though, we get most of our Hub ones actually tend to go to other departments, because a lot of times people tend to use Hub Nashville to report things like theft of like a cell phone or something like that, which will turn over to MMPD, and they have a process to reach out to that constituent and to close that. The ones that we have gotten this year primarily have come from individuals who have spoken directly to us. So we have that communication, and if we decide to close it, then they would be aware of it, and we would explain why it's getting closed.
Okay.
Can I ask on Hub, just from a prompt perspective to Ms. Johnson's question, if somebody goes to the Hub for that purpose or online, are they routed to you all by phone from an anonymity perspective, right? Like I can kind of see somebody trying to make the decision, like, am I gonna enter it here or am I gonna call them? If I call them, is it truly anonymous? Like I just wonder what's kind of the public facing, like, so when we say this is Metro Hotline, do you mean that's Hub, that's
It's
phone,
Hub.
that's everything?
It is
or-
Hub, and admittedly, when you go to that site, I think we explain kind of what fraud, waste, and abuse is.
Okay.
But I will admit that I don't think that it naturally has their contact information and ways to report it without going through Hub. Other than it does have a disclaimer that says that it is coming directly to internal audit and it is confidential. If you decide to put any information in there, it only comes to us. Or if you decide to be anonymous, you can be anonymous.
Okay.
But as we've talked about, we're trying to figure out the best way to advertise and possibly move away from Hub even next year, to try and set up a hotline so that it's even more independent and isn't even viewed as part of Metro at that point.
Okay, I appreciate that, thank you.
Okay, other administrative matters, we have the FY24 budget status.
As you can see, our budget is well under budget. We are at 50% for the year, and that's because we have yet to use any of the consulting funds. We have kind of like a mini RFP that we are sending out to our 4 consultants that we have on contract. The contracts were established in January and February. So we are trying to spend those dollars and get a project up and going so that we can start spending those as much as we can before the end of the fiscal year. We also still have 2 open positions. We have come up with a new game plan on the lead investigator position because the way we were trying to put it out there, we're putting it under a different title that we already had and just making a functional job description, but it means we're limited in what we can require. So we are now going to go, and the pool that we got was just not meeting the requirements that we really needed. So we're going to try establishing a new job so that we can have those requirements and hopefully get a better pool of candidates next time for that lead investigator. We have an auditor 1 position that is open. Those have been good candidate pools, so we plan to hopefully have that one filled by the end of the fiscal year, since that one was a pretty easy one to fill last time. So we hope to fill that one, but give us a little bit of time since we are overwhelmed a little bit right now with some bigger audits that we're trying to get through, because we want to make sure when we bring somebody on, we can train them appropriately.
Got it. Consideration of items for future meetings. Does anybody have any suggestions? Okay. Seeing none. I guess we are adjourned. Does any? Yeah. Okay, we're gonna go into executive session, so I don't need to make a motion to adjourn, we're just adjourned, correct?
Yes, you can make a motion to adjourn, but it's not technically strictly necessary. You do want to make sure that the,
Yeah, I'm gonna turn it off, but we are adjourned. Bye.
No.
Oh,